Hello and welcome back to A Fall from Grace. We'll be continuing where we left off, which, if you recall, is after Cedric, this little dork here, um, did his first pickpocketing, his first, um, relinquishing of rich people's stuff, and he and Vincent are now together. Ooh. I was about to say something, but nah. By the time you guys see this, it's gonna be way past. But yeah, anyways, so he's apparently a competent enough bandit, although there does seem to be something that he may be lacking, which I don't know if you've noticed yet. And you may notice it a little bit more in literally right as this begins, or this continues, I guess. Um, but it's something that the others are apparently very keen on doing, which Cedric may not be too keen on doing, which you will see right now as this continues. So without further ado, let us continue A Fall from Grace. The walk to Plowman's Hill was longer than Cedric had expected, as said hill was located in quite a remote spot between two valleys, each home to a couple of plain-looking towns. It looked like a big challenge for anyone to climb, both on foot and by carriage. It was steep with a lonely, almost overgrown narrow path. Once the bandits reached the hilltop, Cedric spoke to Ridley after catching his breath. If his disheveled look hadn't been convincing earlier, it certainly was now. So why on earth would anyone use this path? It doesn't look like this road leads anywhere important. It's a shortcut if you're heading to Castle Hillsford. Saves you over half an hour's trip compared to other roads. Then once you're in town, it's a pleasant and straightforward journey to the larger southern towns and eventually the sea. That's interesting. So you're saying that there's a good chance that we'll come across some wealthy travelers? Definitely. You'll need to study the roads in the area, kid. Learn to spot which places you can use to your own advantage. The coyote nodded. He'd make a point of doing so in the coming days. Now, let's get off the path. There is a good vantage point a few feet away. You can see the whole valley, including anyone approaching the hill from there. As they made their way to the spot the bear had mentioned, Cedric spoke up again. Wait, you mentioned Hillsford. I almost forgot. Did V or Dion tell you about the masquerade ball that we heard talk of? The folks that we were listening to at the pub mentioned a big manor house outside the town. Don't worry, darling. We've already told them everything. I know just the estate those two were referring to. Are you familiar with it at all, said? No, I've never actually been there myself. No matter. We all agreed on planning a big heist during that event. Bet it didn't take much to convince Dion. That's the sort of camp shit that he'd die for. As if you wouldn't love to be there regardless of planned heist or not. We all love our theatrics. It's why we joined this group. Aye, but he's still the biggest poofter out of all of us. It takes one to know one. Please, I don't want to be stuck out here with your interminable banter, you two. Ridley rolled his eyes, sitting down on a fallen tree trunk covered in foliage. He opened his sack and pulled out the blonde wig that the coyote had noticed earlier, pulling it over his naturally dark hair and fixing it in place. The Doberman chuckled. That thing does not suit you at all. This isn't a beauty contest, bitch. He turned to address Cedric again. I'm sorry, Ced. I keep forgetting that I should explain the method behind this madness. Rob people without a mask more than a couple of times and there's a chance that one of them might recognize you, hence the wig. Yeah, right. What are the odds? Rather high, I'd have you know, punk. Not a good old stabbing can't settle. Stabbing of people and you won't have anyone left to rob. The sun bear proceeded to glue some smaller strands of hair to his cheeks and chin with the contents of one of the flasks that he'd carried with him. It was almost as if the coyote was observing the actor gearing up behind the stage, waiting his entrance, and here he'd assumed Dion was a dramatic one. You needn't worry about it, though, Ced. You're still new to the highwayman's trade, though. I'm sure one day you'll be infamous the country over. I told the kid that I already picture the wanted signs, didn't I? I see a carriage. Victor raised his voice, interrupting the two. The bear rushed over to observe the distant vehicle the fox was pointing at. There, at the foot of the hill. Ridley smiled, rubbing his gloved hands eagerly. Brilliant. Now we put our plan into action. Victor, you stay there and don your mask. Blake, do the same, but wait on the other side of the road. Move it, move it. A spark of excitement was clearly visible in the bear's eyes. Cedric, follow me. After the long and arduous climb, the carriage and its 4 occupants reached the hilltop. Are you quite all right, steward? The stag who had agreed to be the honorary coachman for the day's trip replied from his seat. Never better. The girls might need a few minutes to gather their strengths, so you should rather expect the pace to slow down for a while. Another voice from within the vehicle made itself known. You really should have had my Harry drive those horses today, you know. Nonsense. I didn't want to bother him. It's what I pay him a conspicuous amount of money to do. Would you have all your servants lazing about in the sun like Italian workmen instead of doing their jobs? Oh, don't start again, you two. Greg, you know I'm lenient towards the common folk, and I wanted the 4 of us to get away together for the day, all by ourselves for a change. Let Stu be. You know he's right. We'll all get to enjoy our time by the seaside, not to mention that it will do Helen a lot of good. You know the doctor told her to get away somewhere sunny more often. I suggested a location in India. You won't find any sun in Britain. As the other nobles kept up their discussion, Stewart noticed an odd shape on the pathway above 30 feet away. When he first sighted it, he had assumed that it was a large rock, but now he could clearly make out the shape of a young man lying on his back facing them, coupled with another figure crouched nearby. What the devil? What is it, Stu? I can see a couple of fellows on the road in front of us. One of them seems to be unconscious. The second figure took notice of the carriage and called out as he stood up. Help! Please help! The carriage reached the 2 strangers. The bear's utterly disheveled looks and the pure, unbridled terror in his eyes filled Stewart with dread. Are you all right, my good man? What on earth happened? Oh, thank God you're here, sir. The bear was so upset that he could hardly speak between the sobs. He was now being observed by all the passengers who had begun peeping out the window with the curtains pulled back once curiosity had gotten the better of them. We were attacked! Robbed! My friend here, he tried to escape and they... More heart-wrenching sobs followed these words. He's wounded. Please help us. The stag jumped down from his seat and opened the vehicle's door, addressing the other male passenger. Greg, come and assist me. These fellows were attacked by bandits, and one of them is unconscious. Can we do anything to help? Please stay inside, ladies. We'll just be a moment. Oh, thank you. I can't thank you enough. We need to get him to the closest town. He needs urgent help. You're a godsend, all of you. The bear rushed back to his companion, positioning himself so that he was the only one facing him as the other 2 nobles followed after, Steer merely being able to observe the canine figure from the rear. Stewart bent down on his knees, the owl following suit. He's still breathing. Thank heavens. Let's roll him over. I'll pick him up by the shoulders. You hold his feet. Gregory nodded. We need to move swiftly. He might not have much time left. A loud click resonated just above them. Actually, I wouldn't move at all if I were you. The 2 raised their heads only to see Ridley staring back at them, a pistol in his right hand pointed in their direction. With an ominous rustling of leaves, Blake and Victor emerged from the bushes, surrounding the carriage. One of the women called out from within, noticing the unexpected silence. Is everything all right? Stu? This was followed by a shriek as Blake grabbed the spaniel, clapping a hand over her mouth and dragging her from the vehicle. Hearing the commotion, Stewart tempted fate by crying out, Bandits! Run for your lives! He was sent toppling over, gasping for air as Ridley landed a powerful kick to his stomach. So, we found today's budding hero. Aren't you a brave one? Victor opened the door on the opposite side of the carriage as its last occupant gazed at him in terror. Come on, pretty. I won't have to drag you out like your friend, will I? Helen shook her head. She then did as she was told, joining her companions as the bandits surrounded them. Ridley nudged Cedric with his foot, signaling the coyote could now stand up to join them. As he did, so the four nobles looked on with dismay, realizing at last how every single detail had been a setup. Listen to me, all of you. Now that we're firmly established that there is no real medical emergency occurring, we're here to carry out an exchange. I'll make this very simple. You hand us over all your valuables, and you get to walk home alive. You have a chance to do so voluntarily. Personally, I'd comply. The bear was feigning an icy, matter-of-fact tone, going through his lines as if he had done this a million times before. However, part of him also seemed to be relishing every moment, every dramatic pause, and every look of fear on his victims' faces, making this into some sort of twisted game. His speech also had a veneer of false courtesy, which added to the terrifying feeling that standing before them was an experienced bandit, capable of absolutely anything if angered. Afterwards, we'll search you one by one. That's because many of your kind failed to actually hand over everything, which is a real shame. 'Cause that's when things will get very ugly for the lot of you. Also, it is a waste of time, quite frankly. And the longer you make me wait, the less merciful I'll be. He paused for dramatic effect, tilting his head in Cedric's direction and giving him a subtle wink. This was incredibly jarring, considering the bear's terrifying presence and unquestionably convincing mannerisms. Cedric now understood the reason Victor showered Ridley with praise when it came to this stuff. You scoundrels! You're the bandits the guards have been searching for these past few weeks, aren't you? Steward, please don't make this worse. You'll pay for your wrongdoings, mark my words. Victor rested his right hand on the stag's head, pressing down forcefully as he spoke. You really should listen to your friend's advice and keep quiet, mate. Or what? I'm not afraid of you, vermin. The gallows are where you all belong. A loud shot rang out, smoke rising from the ground mere inches away from the kneeling stag. Almost everyone jumped out of the sudden noise, convinced one of the four nobles had just been killed. The horses began to writhe, startled at the sound. Victor ran up to them to try and keep them steady without risking them running off. He pulled the reins on the two, lowering its head close to his own and speaking to it slowly to calm it down. He then gestured at Cedric to come help with the other. However, Ridley had simply fired a warning shot in Stewart's direction, narrowly avoiding him with unnerving precision. The shot served its purpose as the stag's moment of performative heroism was cut short. Enough. Follow my directions and hand over your valuables as fast as you can. Any more acts of bravery and I'll start by shooting you in the legs, and then work my way up. He turned to Blake. Tie them up as soon as they're finished. Aye, sir. Cedric was surprised to hear the Doberman address Ridley in such a manner, but given the bear was this robbery's leader, it only made sense. Ridley gestured at the coachman. Make sure to tie a noose around this one's neck. Perhaps he can join us beforehand at the gallows if he tries springing any more surprises on us. Once the group had handed everything over to the bandits, they were searched thoroughly. None of them appeared to have been hiding anything, most likely having been scared off by Ridley's gunshot. Victor and Blake finished binding the nobles' hands and covering their mouths, after which the Sun Bear raised his hand again in a sarcastic tone. We're grateful for your cooperation. Now do me a favor of following my two companions without any hesitation. He spoke to the masked bandits, picking up a sack their victims had filled. Get them off the road. As soon as you reach a good location, bind their feet and join us again. And you lot don't try anything foolish. I'm a very good shot. He leered menacingly, having uttered his final words to the group, tapping a finger on the pistol he was holding in his right hand. Thank you for assisting a poor soul in need. The stag responded with a final glare, fury burning in his eyes at his powerlessness against the bandit. The group soon disappeared into the adjacent overgrowth, leaving Cedric and Ridley alone on the silent path. The bear removed his wig, placing it in the sack anew. Cedric was almost afraid to speak after what he had just witnessed. He now knew trying to stay on the bandit's good side was his best bet. Very impressive work, Ridley. How good are you at horse riding, said. What? The coyote was baffled after being caught completely off guard by a seemingly unrelated question. I said, how good are you at horse riding? Well, I first took lessons when I was a kid and have been out hunting on several occasions over the years, so fairly good, I'd say. Brilliant. You'll be sharing a horse with Blake then. He's hopeless with them. Ridley walked into the abandoned carriage direction, freeing the horses from their harnesses and taking hold of the reins. So that's what he was talking about, Cedric thought to himself. The two each mounted a horse, waiting for the others to reappear. The animals were still skittish after the gunshot, thus Cedric did his best to calm his own by having her move around in small circles. Ah, you weren't joking. You're very skilled, Cedric. The coyote gave a small shrug as he smiled at Sun Bear. Can't really unlearn this sort of thing, I suppose. Soon after, Victor and Blake's voices became audible as they re-emerged from the surrounding forest, having removed their masks after leaving their victims behind. About time, you two. What did you two do back there? Have sex? Are you jealous or something? For goodness sake, I asked you both to shut up already. The bear and the Doberman laughed. You can't ask for something impossible, Vic. You've got your own boyfriend to worry about anyway. What do you mean by your own? We're not a couple. You bloody confessed that you were still into me yesterday evening. Yes, and? Don't sound so desperate. It's a turn-off. As the others kept up their typical banter, Cedric had grown accustomed to, Victor wandered over to the coyote, gazing at him and his newfound steed. Noticing he had the fox's attention, Cedric stuck up a pose and intimidated the manner of an army general, causing his lover to smile in amusement. I didn't realize that I'd fallen in love with a gallant knight. I'm utterly tussled, you half-wit. You look beautiful to me, darling, and you know I love a man in uniform. Hearing those words, Cedric suddenly recalled his dream from the previous night. You know, I recently thought about that time that you tried on my hunting suit. Do you remember that? And when was that? It was the first time that I had gone hunting with my father. We went swimming in the lake after. I got back. Then I had you try on my clothes once we were dried. Of course. How could I forget? I recall it vividly. Well, now's as good a time as any to confess that moment that I saw you looking all handsome in that red jacket and those shiny boots. I got the most massive hard on. The fox bursted out laughing. He obviously hadn't been expecting that remark. I was young, foolish, and naive, so obviously I had no idea what had caused it at the time. Oh, Cedric, I remember that day very fondly. I had just realized that I was massively in love with you. Cedric's mouth hung agape. You were? You were more worldly wise than me, evidently. Victor's expression turned mischievous. I also recall that I was holding a whip when I tried your suit on. Ridley suddenly interrupted the conversation, raising his voice so that all could hear him. Everyone, please. Have you all lost your minds? We need to get out of here before anyone else shows up. Make sure you search the carriage for valuables. Then each of you hop on behind Cedric and I. You can resume your conversations when we're home. Move it. The other bandits did as they were told, Victor opening the doors to the vehicle and Blake untying the sacks placed on the rear of each of their contents. Once they were done, and the group was finally able to ride back down the hill heading towards the familiar site of Hidingstone Forest. Late afternoon slowly crept in. The contrast between the dimming, warm light and the trees' dark, elongated shadows were growing more apparent as summer neared its end. Cedric couldn't avoid feeling that there was a supernatural mystery to this forest, home to many bandits and rovers before the masquerade's time. He recalled Dr. Phillips, his algebra teacher, whose enthusiasm for Celtic myths and legends had fascinated the coyote at a young age, adding an enjoyable conclusion to many a tedious lesson. The curious aspect was that now he and the others felt like they were witnessing one of these tales from the opposite perspective, as if they were the mischievous spirits inhabiting the ancient woodland. Once they all reached the camp, they jumped off the horses, whilst Victor picked up the bag with the day's loot, carefully inspecting the various items. Dion will be very glad to see today's findings. We've been working hard this week. How do you fellows go about sharing the loot amongst yourselves? Good question. It's usually split equally between us. We all put in our amount of hard work each day, so it's only fair. Usually Dion is the one who deals with the distribution, as well as estimating what certain items might be worth, though to be fair, Selwyn often has a knack for that too. Good evening, boys. Robbery went well, I presume? It's hardly evening yet, Hall. Ah, you're right. The sun's just beginning to set sooner, and my brain refuses to adapt. Hollis walked over from his carriage to join them, beaming once he noticed the newfound steeds. Why, these are some fine-looking animals. I'll make sure that they're adequately fed, and can take 'em to market tomorrow morning. He took hold of the reins, tying them to the side of his vehicle. Victor resumed his conversation with Cedric. As you can see, even these horses can come in handy by helping us earn a pretty penny. The coyote nodded. It's all very practical. When you've got to make do with anything that you come across, you'll start to think of so many options that you'll never even entertain the notion of before. In fact, I'm sure you already have. Plus, you're a fast learner. Any other rich bastard would be completely clueless and would die out here in a week. Serves them right too, accustomed as they are to servants getting all their work done every single day. I'm sure some rich folk would be able to survive. People can be surprisingly resourceful given the right context. Victor rolled his eyes. I'll believe it when I see it. Ridley, who had been keeping up his usual banter with Blake, waltzed over to the two canines, clearly proud of himself after a victorious outing. He chuckled as he eyed Cedric. The coyote somehow looked even worse than he had during the robbery, bits of dirt clearly visible in his hair and various dusty patches on his jacket and breeches. Ced, I'm so sorry we literally had to do you dirty today. Each one of us pulled off that robbery with near a single mistake. I'd be proud of myself if I were you for orchestrating all of that, Rid. And who cares if I had to be the one lying on the dirt? Nevertheless, I want to hand you some clean garments. Please come with me. He moved away, heading for his tent, waving a hand at Victor and Hollis. Won't be a minute, you two. Oh, Hollis, could I have something to drink while you're about? Anything you like will do. The tiger bellowed after him. I'm not a waiter. How many times must I tell that brazen bear? Cedric caught up to him as he entered the tent, Ridley taking off his jacket and throwing it on the untidy bed. I just wanted to talk to you alone for a minute. The bear sounded unusually serious. He picked up and effortlessly lit a pipe that he kept next to his mirror. Do you smoke? I have another pipe in one of these drawers. Thank you very much, but I am not really big on smoking. Lucky you. The bandit cleared his voice, his eyes meeting Cedric. I hope nothing I asked of you today made you uncomfortable. Not at all. I know I can have a tendency to let people walk over me a little, and you're probably figured that out already just by chatting with me. Hearing all about that Lysander friend of yours did give me a hint. But trust me, if I were uncomfortable with anything, I will let you know. Ridley nodded, seemingly satisfied by the answer, sitting down and opening a couple of drawers from a small cabinet as he did. Good. I like a man who was able to stand up for himself when needed. In my life, I've learned that it can be no good keeping things bottled up, as you know. He handed over a clean jacket of a similar shade of green to Cedric's usual, but with a few more intricate ornaments on the cuffs. I feel like you and I share quite a strong connection, Ced. I felt it since the first day that we chatted together, so if there's ever anything on your mind, or if you ever need help with anything, I'm here to listen. The coyote smiled, touched by the bear's kind offer. There was a spark in the bandit's eye the moment that he uttered his next words. I find you very cute, too. I can tell what Vic sees in you. Cedric's modesty turned to growing embarrassment after hearing that statement. Ridley stood up and combed the coyote's messy hair back up with a gloved hand. His voice was warm and as smooth as silk. I suspect you have eyes only for the fox of yours right now, at least in a romantic sense. But physically, Should you ever want to get up to anything fun with me, you know my door is always open for anything you'd like to do. Unless I'm not your type, which it's fine if I'm not. What? What was happening? Was the cool and confident Ridley getting flirty with Cedric of all people? The coyote had trouble wrapping his mind around this, especially since he had come to realize over the past few days that he himself found the bear very attractive. There was a reason that he'd opened up so quickly to the bandit. What he liked in Ridley was similar to what he liked in Victor: the kindness, the confidence, the openness, the charm. Obviously, he shared a connection with the fox that he couldn't even begin to be matched by anyone else, but when it came to physical attraction or mere infatuation, he was confused. There was no way around it. In fact, he felt the same way about most of the other bandits as well, though to a lesser extent. Noticing his distant facial expressions, Ridley took a step back. Perhaps I should point out my advances are not romantic, and you wouldn't be going behind Victor's back were you to ever get physical with me. You can freely discuss it with him. He's done such things in the past himself. Truth be told, we've all slept with each other over here, Salwin being the only exception. That's because he doesn't care much for sex, which I honestly envy him for. But we're all very open about the subject, which is how I feel everyone should be. Cedric finally replied. I'm just stunned you like me. Well, what's not to like? I'm not sure. I mean, I wouldn't... This is all just so unexpected. I hadn't even figured out my preferences until like 2 or 3 weeks ago, for heaven's sake. The bear laughed. That's all right, Ced. You have all the time in the world you can think about this. I find you very handsome, Ridley. The boldness of yours is a big turn-on. Cedric blurted out his confession before his brain was able to keep him from doing so. Ah, so my flirting hasn't been in vain after all. The coyote looked away, too flustered to make proper eye contact. After a short pause, Ridley spoke again, noticing the fact that Cedric was still standing near the tent's exit. Please sit down while you change your clothes, Ced. All this standing about business is starting to get a bit awkward. I would offer you a drink, but as you can see, I'm all out. Cedric thanked him and sat on the bed, getting the clean garments to his right and taking off his dirty jacket. He smiled nervously as the bear puffed his pipe in his chair. The coyote kept up the conversation, still feeling rather insecure but also not being able to contain his own rapid curiosity. What specifically about me would you even call attractive? Do you really have such little self-confidence, lad? You take a lot of care in dressing well and appearing properly groomed each morning. You had me fooled. I suppose I always curate how I look. I just never thought of it that way. You're a well-spoken, modest, and elegant boy who knows what he wants and is ready to stand up for himself. Personally, I find that irresistible. Even Blake has told me that he finds you hot, and he's extremely picky. It's insane. A merry Victor suddenly burst into the tent with a couple of drinks in his hands. Drinks, drinks all around. He shifted to a more serious tone, noticing that he'd likely interrupted something. Is everything all right? You two have been gone for a while. Ridley replied before the befuddled coyote was able to even think about what to say. We're fine. We've been trying to instill some well-deserved self-confidence in Ced here. Told him both Blake and I find him very attractive, and he still won't believe me. He thanked Victor, taking hold of his drink whilst Cedric buttoned up on his new jacket. I'm sorry. I'm still stunned is all. You ought to be, my love. I'm just lucky that I managed to steal you away before any other young blade did. The fox's eyes lit up. You know, I had a fun idea. He turned to face the sun bear. How about a firearm contest between us, to pass the evening and to train Cedric's rifle skills? I like the sound of that. Blake could assist him when it's his turn. He's the firearms nut. Yes, that would be perfect. Does that sound good to you, sweetheart? Cedric smiled. It sounds brilliant. The bandits all spent the evening making merry, Cedric feeling the newfound sense of belonging for the place and his new companions growing ever stronger. The shooting contest was a success, And though the coyote felt a bit rusty after having not held a pistol in ages, he still managed to win a couple of rounds, notably impressing the stern Doberman. During the meal that followed, Dion sat next to him, pretending to strike up a casual conversation at first, only to follow it up by asking Cedric for advice on a new script that he was writing for a play called Nymph Nymph Loriona, Queen of the Forest. Selwyn then showed the coyote some new sketches, explaining in detail the mechanical contraptions that he had conjured on paper. Once the meal was over, a tipsy Victor jokingly proclaimed that in the near future, Cedric would be able to kill a man from a mile's distance with his amazing marksmanship skills. This started off as a series of imaginary bloody scenarios from each one of the bandits involving Cedric as the ruthless killer. The coyote himself was a bit put off by all of this, as he objected to the mere thought of murdering anyone, not to mention that he hadn't imagined the bandits actually considered killing any of their victims an option. "We merely jest, dear boy. Of course, we don't expect a sweet youth such as yourself to turn into such a ruthless rogue. Nor does any rogue have to be a murderer." "Exactly. That might only happen in extremely dangerous and unexpected scenarios." Though the others attempted to reassure the coyote, the uneasy thought of ending up in a deadly situation someday lingered in the back of his mind. He recalled Victor's tale of the two noblemen's duel in his old hideout. After toasting Cedric one last time, the group split up, each retiring to their own tent for the night. Ridley scampered over to Cedric's one last time, calling out his name to get his attention. "I didn't get to say this to you earlier, Ced. Would you like to go for a walk with me tomorrow evening? I have a feeling that the two of us could have a nice long chat together. And if not tomorrow, any evening you like, just let me know." "That sounds lovely, of course. I will. Sleep well, Rid." "Good night, lad." The bear replied with a wink and walked off in the opposite direction. Victor wrapped his left arm around Cedric's right. "I have a feeling that you'll like him as much as he likes you." The coyote gave a humorous reply. "Whatever do you mean, my sweet fox?" "I find it very cute. V, you know I love you, and that will never change." "Of course, my darling." "But I will be honest and admit that Rid has successfully charmed me, on a surface level at least. There's just something about him that I like, something that reminds me of you." "Hmm, I never thought of that, but you have a point." The two entered their tent as they conversed. Cedric sat down on the bed and began to undress while Victor lit a couple of candles. The dim light lent an immediate magical aurora to the space the two were in. Another near supernatural aspect was the fact that Cedric was having a conversation that he had never thought that he'd be having with anyone in his life up until that very moment. He'd never been in love before, and though he had previously felt physical attraction towards certain people, his mind had always attempted to repress it. This really was the first time that he was able to discuss it freely. It almost felt like being a teenager all over again and discovering what love and infatuation are for the first time, and feelings like the world is at your own feet. You know, physical attraction and romance are two very different things, even though many people will try to convince you that they are one and the same. The coyote wasn't quite sure how to interpret that statement. Thinking it over, he realized Victor was right. What he discovered he felt for Ridley was not even remotely the same emotion that he felt for the fox, but there must have been a reason why Victor was explaining it that way. "So you're saying that you don't mind?" The fox lit one more candle, replying delicately, "Not at all. And the fact that you'll be honest about it with me makes me love you even more." The fox took off his overcoat, slowly spinning around to gaze at Cedric lying naked on the bed. "You look even more irresistible in the candlelight. And to tell you the truth, I don't feel tired at all right now." He let his breeches slid down to the ground and took a step forward. "Are you in the mood for anything?" "Not right now because, people are watching." "You're so very gorgeous, V. But I'd rather save this for another evening when I'm feeling a little less tired and people aren't watching." Victor picked up his breeches a little awkwardly, fondling them and laying them down at the foot of the bed. "Of course. It's up to you. Noticing the fox's smile, Cedric replied with a drowsy grin in turn, not wanting to disappoint his partner. Come here, you rascal. As soon as Victor had sat down next to him, Cedric pulled him in for a tender kiss. The fox leaned in and kissed back, stroking Cedric's hair. You did very well today, and we make a great team. Thank you for everything. Good night, sweetheart. See you in the morning, my boy. Cedric was up early the next morning, so while Victor was still fast asleep, he decided to go for a quick walk in the forest after getting dressed. For the first time in what he reckoned were 3 or 4 months, the morning air felt chilly on his fur. After an enchanted summer, autumn was inevitably on its way. The poetic landscape of the woodland the coyote had now gotten used to calling his home was awash with a warm morning light and thrill-echoing birdsong. Thinking to himself, he realized that he was already aware of how sad that he would feel on the day the group decided that it would be better to leave in search of a new hideout. This was a moment in his life that he was going to treasure the memory of in the coming years, that much he was sure about. He walked beside the murmuring stream, watching the sunlight grow brighter over the distant and quaint view of Hidingstone Town, hidden behind the theatrical setting of a row of secular trees. The strong sense of being an outsider looking in was ever present at his side as he observed the tiny figures of the villagers going about their daily lives, along with the carts, carriages, livestock, and groceries being transported in and out of town. However, the coyote was no longer a lonely outcast. He had found the group that he knew he belonged with, and it was a feeling that he had never had a chance to experience before that filled him with joy, almost to the point of making him want to dance all by himself as he wandered the shady greenery. Now that he had begun to steadily improve his banditry skills, now that he had started to grow closer with the others, now that his relationship with Victor had gotten off to a strong start, he felt, perhaps naively, that he could take on any challenge that the world could send his way. He knelt down by the watercourse to give his muzzle a quick rinse, gathering the cool water in his hands. He was feeling productive, perhaps cooking some breakfast for himself and the fox could be added to the day's agenda. Reaching the camp 10 minutes later, he noticed that the bed of the two that they were sharing were now empty, meaning that Victor was finally awake. Perhaps the fox had also opted for a morning walk to stretch his legs. Cedric knocked on the squeaky door of Holly's carriage. This was followed by the sleepy tiger's appearance a few seconds later. Hmm, morning, Ced. What can I do for you? I'm sorry, Hollies. Do you have any bacon and sausages stored away with our supplies? I was thinking of cooking some breakfast for V and I. I can make something for you too, if you like. Hollis yawned loudly and stretched his tired muscles. Yes, I do. And yes, that would be most appreciated. It is a real pleasure to hear someone offer to cook something for me for a change. He wandered back inside the vehicle, re-emerging shortly after with the meat Cedric had asked for. I think these should do. Cedric beamed, his stomach beginning to make itself heard. They're more than enough, thanks. Do you know where Victor is, by the way? I went for a morning walk and now that I'm back, he's not in bed anymore. I'm not sure. I'm barely awake, to be honest, though I think that I heard him speaking to Blake. They must have gone for a quick hike by themselves. I see. I'll let you know when breakfast is ready. Thanks, Ced. Much appreciated. The coyote took a while to cook everything just to the right amount, but by the time that he felt that he was done, the sausages and the bacon looked and smelled delicious. No sooner had he begun to walk over to the tiger's carriage to let him know that the food was ready, that he caught sight of the fox heading back towards the camp with a notably excited air about him. Food's ready, Hall. Coming! Victor gave Cedric a quick kiss once he reached the spot where the coyote was standing. What is this delicious smell, darling? Well, I'm feeling productive today, so I thought that I'd start by cooking breakfast for the both of us. Aw, you didn't have to. That's wonderful. I can't wait to try what you've made. The coyote picked up a few spare tin plates Hollies had cleaned the prior evening, scraping the sizzling hot meat onto them and handing them to Victor and the tiger. I hope you don't mind me not hanging around with you, but I prefer to have breakfast by myself as part of my morning routine. No problem at all. You know where to find us if you need anything. Hollies disappeared from sight, leaving the two lovers by themselves around the warm campfire. This warmth will soon be a blessing once the winter comes around. Victor lifted his eyebrows after taking a bite of one of the sausages. Since when were you such a great cook, my dear? Just something that I choose to practice every once in a while, never knowing when it might come in handy, and sure enough, it has. These are fantastic. As Victor chewed on the meat, he spoke up again, still noticeably excited, as to why Cedric was still in the dark. I'm excited, as you can probably tell, and that's because I've received some very good news. Blake told me that he came across a couple of bandits hiding out in another part of the forest last night. They didn't see him, slick as he is, but he overheard them both boasting about a successful robbery that they just pulled off as they dined. And from the description that he gave me, these two matched the appearance of a couple of rotten scoundrels that I was once unfortunate enough to stumble upon. Blake even saw the sacks with the loot that they've thrown about on the ground next to them, and I'm telling you, it was no beggar's money, but fine silver, gold, and sparkling jewels. A far cry from the pitiful robberies that these two engaged in when I first met them. I give him that. The coyote was a tad confused as to why Victor had gone on a tangent about a couple of other bandit success, even though he obviously seemed to know the two. Nevertheless, he decided to engage with the fox's tail. That sounds very nice for them. I'm glad that they've been as lucky as we have recently. Victor snorted loudly, replying with his mouth full. You silly goose. I'm describing all this to you because I want the two of us to take their loot from them. This was unexpected. Of all the things the fox could have said, Cedric felt that this one came out of left field more than anything that he could have attempted to picture. He was puzzled at this last revelation and took a moment to gather his thoughts. What? So steal from other bandits? What about honor among thieves and all that? Victor spat out the bacon that he had been chewing, laughing wildly. Tss, oh, please. You're way too much of a gentleman, my dear, especially considering the two we're talking about. Noticing the coyote's increasingly troubled look, he elaborated. You're correct. Usually I wouldn't bother doing such a thing. But why not steal from them if fate has led them and their gold straight to us? They're no doubt heard about the other bandits hiding out in these woods, and yet have selfishly ignored that information. I'm not saying that they wouldn't be welcomed if they came to us in friendship, but they've made a conscious decision to not do so. Cedric didn't like this idea at all, but seeing Victor act so self-assuredly must have meant that he knew what he was doing, and his explanation seemed to make sense. He took a deep breath and answered as best as he could. I guess you have a point. They could have joined or formed a temporary alliance with the masquerade, yet they didn't. He ought to go through with this. You only live once. YOLO! I'm willing to go along with your plan as long as it's not a risky feat. The fox wiped his mouth, still chuckling. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It would be very risky. I'm sure that those two will be armed, but we have the element of surprise, so in case either of them decide to pick up a weapon, we'll shoot them before they'll be able to do anything. In fact, I might ask Blake if he'll be willing to hide nearby and keep his rifle pointed in their direction the whole time. You could even swap places with him, if you felt like it. You proved that you were a pretty good shot yesterday evening. These words sent Cedric's mind spinning. The other bandits had often portrayed themselves as ambivalent on the subject of taking lives. They assured him that he would only kill someone in absolutely dire circumstances. Was this really a situation Victor could consider dire? Hearing the fox discuss this matter so flippantly, as if he were listing off some items that he were meaning to carry along for an outing, filled the coyote with a sense of dread and justified rage. But could it really be that wrong? Was this the last step that he was going to have to overcome if he wanted to be a proper bandit? Was this really what it was going to take? So, you're willing to take their lives over some gold. Is that what you're saying? Victor looked puzzled after hearing the question. What I'm trying to say is that I am hoping that I doesn't have to come to that. But we need to be ready in case it happens. No, this was something Cedric wasn't ready for. Something he objected to, no matter the circumstances. Victor wasn't going to talk his way out of this one. I'm not going to kill anyone. I thought that I'd made myself sufficiently clear yesterday evening. I'm not a murderer. I morally object to the very idea of taking someone's life. How can you speak of doing something like this so lightly? Cedric began to raise his voice, moving away from the fox. Look, I understand your concerns, But a bandit's life isn't all sunshine and roses. This was one of the first things that I told you the day that we set off on our journey. The sooner you're faced with this fact, the better. The coyote stood up, anger now burning inside of him at Victor's dismissal of his feelings. There is a difference between ending up in a deadly situation and choosing to actively create one. I thought that you knew better than to do such a thing, V. The fox sprung up from his seat, imitating his companion, finally losing his temper and growing with each word he spoke. So what? Now you're the arbiter of morality? Give me a break. I guess some of the attitude from that sort of rich scum that I knew far too well has rubbed off on you after all. There was no moderating to be done anymore. This had now turned into a full-on argument. Cedric finally burst after hearing the fox's latest insult. I hate to break it to you, but I'm the descendant of a noble family, and the world isn't all black and white. I thought you realized that. But now all your previous venomous comments about anyone from a higher class than yourself make sense. Is that really what you think of all the people from a wealthy background? Is each and every one of them the very devil in your eyes? A giant monolith you're bent on attacking? What makes you any better, stealing from and killing others who are in just as bad of a situation as yourself? That doesn't make you a skilled bandit, it makes you a hypocrite. The moment that you kill someone, you are implicitly declaring that they deserve to die and you deserve to live. That's what you're saying. By actively claiming your life is worth more than theirs, you're sitting on the same level of awful morals as the rich jerks that you despise. Victor's eyes betrayed a look of hurt and disappointment. He hadn't been able to answer and had left Cedric to his rant, but his rage eventually got the best of him, and he clenched his fist, stepping forward. Who the fuck do you think you are? You think that you can show up here and lecture me on how to live my life? Insult me and call me a fucking hypocrite? People such as you have killed 10 times as many people any bandit has, and they don't even have the guts to do it with their own hands, and now I'm the savage. Perhaps you're not fit for this after all. Perhaps I should have left you to rot away and feel sorry for the shit life that you were leading. That gilded cage of yours. He moved away, lowering his voice in defeat. I'm sorry. I thought that this could have been a new beginning for you. For the both of us. Cedric shook his head even though he knew the fox couldn't see him. So did I, Victor. I guess I was wrong after all. I'll ask Blake to assist me with the job. I'll see you later. Victor's last words were the nail in the coffin for the conversation, after which he and Cedric both walked off in opposite directions. The coyote had no idea where his steps were taking him, but all he knew was that he needed to walk, to get away. His thoughts were a mess, each of them ringing out loudly in his head, creating a silent cacophony that he desperately wanted to repress. Throughout all of this, he constantly questioned whether he was the one in the wrong, but deep down he knew he wasn't. Victor was the one who owed him an apology for expecting too much of him, for talking down on him and forcing him into scenarios the coyote was uncomfortable with. He never agreed to be the same kind of bandit Victor was. In fact, both of them had admitted that they wanted this to be a temporary situation before they could attempt to build themselves a better life. Right now, however, it appeared Victor cherished this life and refused to listen to anyone except himself. Cedric lifted up his gaze and realized that he'd reached the stream and had been walking alongside it for the past 5 minutes. He let himself collapse on the soft grass, closing his eyes. What if Victor didn't apologize? What if he told Cedric his inner fears were true, that he wasn't fit for this life after all? The possibility of him leaving the bandits and returning to his hometown loomed in his mind. But that would mean returning to Lysander. He couldn't do that to himself. The other alternative was using the banditry skills that he had learned thus far to fend for himself and lead a solitary life. But that would mean never seeing Victor again, and Cedric loved him, and knew that there was nothing that he could do to change that. He opened his eyes anew, glancing at the boughs of the trees above him, firmly silhouetted against the bright sky. He slowly breathed in and out, finally managing to clear his mind of the multitude of worrying thoughts that had been lingering within. He felt as if the only person existing in the universe at that precise moment was Cedric, surrounded by the unmoving trees above and the eternal sky beyond them. The coyote remained lying where he was for a couple of hours, listening to the stream's chatter and forgetting everything else. Eventually, he picked himself up with immense effort and trudged his way back to the camp. His feet felt like they were made of lead, getting heavier with each step he took. Upon arrival, he noticed the fox was still absent, and the place was unnervingly quiet. Holly seemed to have tidied the plates the two had left behind them after their argument, as they were no longer anywhere in sight. He'd probably heard everything, Cedric thought to himself. Who knows what he had made of all of it? As he glanced around the camp, the coyote reckoned one thing that he could do was head back to his tent and wait until Victor's return. However, another thought crossed his mind. He recalled Ridley's words the previous day. If there's anything on your mind, or if you ever need help with anything, I'm here to listen. Now seemed like the right moment to take the bear up on his offer. He didn't even feel like he needed to talk about Victor. Any subject would do, as long as it helped him take his mind off his troubles and feel better. Ridley was easy to talk to and gave Cedric the impression of being a wise and understanding person. Truth be told, all he needed was someone who would listen, someone who could perhaps understand what he was going through, someone who could offer helpful advice in a moment of need. Cedric. The coyote jolted. The person who had gently called out his name was but a few feet behind him, and their accent had an upper-class twinge. He spun around, meeting the broad and imposing hyena's gaze. I'd like to talk to you. Please follow me to my tent. Cedric nodded without uttering a word. Dion hadn't given away any possible reason why he might want to have a conversation with him, but his tone seemed formal, or perhaps even worried. Whatever the reason, the coyote would find out soon enough. He silently followed the hyena's footsteps, moving across the lonely camp and observing the white mist which had begun to envelop everything around them. To be continued. An autosave has been created for you. Hello and thank you for reading this fourth build for Project New Moon's A Fall from Grace. This has been yet another lengthy build full of new backgrounds and illustrations, as we really hope that you've enjoyed reading and we can't wait to share the rest of the story with you all. This novel is written by, composed, and illustrated by and illustrated by project developer Alex, with Grayson as a relief coder, music programmer, and story designer. I tried my hand at coding for this last build specifically. It's been fun figuring things out, trying to maintain the style AFFG has had so far. If anything clashes, you know who to blame. This visual novel's entire plot, start to finish, was conceived on 2 voice calls between Grayson and myself back in around March of 2022. We have so much fun designing a story that utilizes Alex's gorgeous way of setting places and characters. And Gray's ability to yes and a VM plot over only 2 calls. This has been a passion project that I've been so excited to be a part of and continue to be excited the continuation of. A Fall from Grace represents more than just a visual novel. It is also the story of how Alex and I became best friends. Ever since the first message of, "Hey, I love your art," on Twitter. Then following this, the idea of Fall from Grace came about very quickly after Grayson's offered me a place on the Project New Moon's team. A special thanks to Mash, the chief editor, proofreader, and storyline aide for the project. Without the help of Mash, we would not be able to release this on any previous builds to you now. And a big thanks to our coder, Kamek, for their own hard work, as well as for salvaging mine and Grayson's coding work into a visual novel that works from start to finish. Special thanks to Marcy of Eden's Reach for helping with certain elements of the coding. As well as a massive thank you to everyone on Project New Moon's Discord server and our amazing moderators, Okami, Butter, Gary, and Thunger. I hope you enjoyed the OST written by Alex. No expenses were spared when Alex suggested a soundtrack based on English folk songs. Though I did sneak one track into the second build for the Soldier's March, just based on a piece of music that Alex and I both adore. If you did enjoy this visual novel, be sure to follow us both on Twitter using the icons on the main menu. We also have a link to our Discord server here on blah, blah, blah. Okay, my god. There's a lot of reading. A Fall from Grace. Okay. Finally. So, not everything is good in paradise, obviously. We have Cedric and Victor at each other's throat unexpectedly at the end of the visual novel, but you can kind of see that something like this was going to happen. Something being that the topic of taking a life was going to eventually pop up because, I mean, you're bandits. Eventually, you might have to stabby someone, and that stab might be fatal. Um, I did not expect it to come to head with Victor and Cedric himself. I would expect it to be Cedric with arguing with someone else, but it is something that I guess you could say was sort of foreshadowed, where not just in the fact that the bandits were very into what they're doing as they were doing it, but in the fact that they're a little too into it, and it could just be like for them it's just acting. And in my mind, for Dion, it probably is just acting. That these are all roles that they're filling, and they just happen to get loot in the end. But like realistically, you have to expect that you may hurt someone badly while you're robbing them, while you're doing these heists. So if Cedric wants to continue doing what he is doing, he kind of has to get it in his head that, you know, he's going to have to hurt someone eventually. Whether he hurts them and they're okay, or he hurts them and they tragically pass away, then, that's not, you know, we won't know that until it happens. I'm assuming that's going to happen when, they do the whole ballroom heist. Um, what else? I am curious as to what Dion wants to discuss with Cedric. My assumption is that it has to do something with what Dion and Vincent initially discussed. Because if you recall, when they first arrived there, um, Dion had a discussion with Victor, and it seemed kind of serious. And my assumption is that it has to do with, Cedric, with his unwillingness to hurt someone. I would say that, like, if you're a bandit, then yeah, hurt someone to the point where they'll be okay later on, but not kill them because you just want their money. You don't want a felony. Um, you don't want to go down for murder. What else? Mm, honestly, I don't know. It's been a long 2 hours for me in recording. If you have any, if you want to discuss, write it down in the comments, and thank you all for watching slash listening. If you would like to play A Fall from Grace, you can do so by going down into the link in the description where you will find the presumably Twitter page, which should have a direct link for the HIO page where you can download the game and play it. And obviously, as you can tell, this is part of like the group, the Eden's Reach, which should and update sooner or later. But I do know that they are working on it, and there are a ton of CGs that have been done, and it's just a thing of putting it together and releasing it. So the next video you see of Eden's Reach, whenever you see it, is going to be ginormous. And then there's One Last Night, which I am hoping will eventually update sooner or later. I want to know what's going to happen with Dorian and Xavier. And but yeah, so write down the comments, whatever, whatever support their patrons, whatever. I will be linking that down in the description, as well as my links, everything down in the description as usual. And I guess that's it for now, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.